Hey everybody, welcome to RetroRockets. This is my YouTube channel that I'm going to use to document my various projects in the hobby of rocketry. This video is just going to be an introductory video. I'm going to go ahead and just introduce the channel, introduce myself, and talk a little bit about what you can expect to see on the channel. And then at the very end of the video, I'm going to go into my my rocketry origin story, how I got involved in the rocketry. I like those kind of things. I like listening to how people got involved in the hobby. I think it's interesting. I like hearing about the kind of things that captured their imagination, maybe back when they were younger, and led them to continue in the hobby as an adult. So we'll go ahead and just start with the name of the channel, which is RetroRockets. I chose that name on purpose, and the reason is because I tend to be kind of nostalgic for the period when I got involved heavily in rocketry, which was the mid-70s. So the vast majority of the projects you'll see on this channel will probably be cloning type projects from rockets that were released from about mid-1960s to the mid to late 1980s. That's not to say we won't be doing any new rockets, because I think right now Estes is just killing it. They are really coming out with some pretty cool stuff, and so you'll definitely see some newer stuff as well. We'll do some reviews, we'll do catalog walkthroughs. I'll give you my opinions, and they're just my opinions on various things in the catalog. Yeah, so that's the kind of thing you can expect to see on the channel. As far as myself, my name is Don Brent. I live in the greater Phoenix area in a town just south of Phoenix called Santan Valley. I belong to the Uss local NAR section, and have been kind of off and on with them over the last 20 years or so. Since I've lived in here. I moved here in '98. Before that I lived in San Diego, and we'll get more into that in my rocketry origin story. But I'm 57 years old. This is being shot in June of 2021, and yeah, I just really enjoy the hobby, and I wanted to start a YouTube channel. So as far as the first thing we're going to do after I do the intro video, we'll probably do just a quick Mojo building project. I'm going to clone an Alpha 3. Not so much clone it because I have the kit, but I'm going to toss the black body tube that comes with it currently and cut a new one and paint it white, and we're going to give it the 70s red and white paint scheme. So that'll be the first project you'll see posted after this video. It's just a quick, like I said, a quick Mojo builder. After that, we have a few directions we can go. We'll see when we get there what the next project after that will be. So that kind of wraps up the introduction part of this video. The next part is going to be just kind of my story of how I got involved in rocketry. And for that, I'm going to go grab a few things to use as show and tell items during that video, so it won't be quite so boring. And but if those, if that kind of thing isn't your thing, yeah, feel free to skip this part of the video. So I'll be right back. One more quick thing before I get into my little personal history. I just wanted to mention that this YouTube channel isn't just going to be model rockets. It's going to also have an occasional mid-power and maybe even a couple of high-power projects in it too. I don't want to limit myself. I do enjoy all aspects of the hobby. Probably the majority of things will be in the model to mid-power range, just because of financial reasons. I can't afford to be lighting off high-power motors every week or month. So those projects will probably be a little more limited. I'll also try to throw in a few launch videos. When I do go out to launch, I'll try to get some film and show some flights of the stuff we build on the channel. And The other thing I wanted to mention real quick about the channel, as you can tell, I'm doing this on just a little handy cam video camera, and there may be some cell phone camera, possibly a webcam. I don't have a lot of professional equipment. I don't have a dedicated mic or anything like that. So to start things out, this is just this channel is sort of I'm using it as an informal way to document my various projects. So I don't want to invest thousands of dollars in video equipment. So just please, excuse the quality. I'm going to do my best to make it presentable, but it's probably not going to be professional level. So kind of just temper your expectations as far as that goes. And so now we'll get on to my my little origin story for the hobby. The very first exposure I had to model rockets was actually a very traumatic one. This is probably one of my earliest memories in life. It was 1967 or 1968. I was in nursery school, and the school had arranged for some older kids, 5th, 6th grade, maybe junior high, I don't know, to come in and do a demonstration launch with a model rocket. And us little kids were just supposed to, probably ooh and ah, and I'm sure the school thought it would be a fun thing. So these kids bring in an Estes or Centauri launch pad and a rocket. As I recall, the rocket was probably around the size of a Big Bertha. I seem to remember having a pointy nose, so I don't think it was a Big Bertha, but and these memories are kind of burned in my head. So anyway, so this rocket was sitting over in the area, the carpeted area where us kids would sit. And again, this was about 1967 or 1968, so this was right around the end of the Gemini program and the beginning of Apollo. So there was a lot of TV coverage of rocket launches, and I used to watch these on television and just be fascinated by them. And so I knew that when a rocket launched, it was accompanied by a lot of fire and smoke. And so to my little 3 or 4-year-old brain, these idiots were going to launch a rocket in our classroom, and my life was in danger. I was absolutely inconsolable. I remember sitting on this table, looking at that rocket, and thinking my little 3-year-old life was about to be snuffed out in a menagerie of fire and flame and smoke, and that I was the only one that understood that rockets do this when they launch. And yeah, they could not calm me down. And again, this is like certainly my earliest vivid memory in my life. I don't remember a lot before that, but I do remember this quite clearly. And they actually had to call my mother to come and get me. They could not calm me down, and I was too young to articulate what I was afraid of. So yeah, I ended up going home, and I never did see the launch. So anyway, that was my first exposure to model rockets. A little traumatic. It's kind of surprising that I wanted anything to do with them after that, but I did. And so we'll skip forward to the next chapter. Okay, so fast forward about 5 years, maybe 6, from the nursery school incident, and I'm about 7 or 8 years old. I was gifted by my father, I think, a Citation Quasar starter kit, and I actually have one. This is it. This is not the exact one I was gifted. This is one I was later obtained off of eBay, just because it was the very first model rocket product that I ever owned in my life. So I felt it was important to have it in my collection. So anyway, I was gifted this. As you can see, we can open it up a little bit here. Again, I was 7 years old, and when I opened it up, I was greeted with a bag of wire and clips and some pieces of the launch pad I didn't quite understand, and the rocket itself. which was kind of cool looking to a 7-year-old. But I really didn't get it. I didn't quite understand all the aspects. I don't think it ever dawned on me that this thing was actually supposed to fly. So bottom line is I never built it. I think what I did was I took the rocket out. I may have put the decal on and flown it around the living room as a 7-year-old is prone to do, more like a toy. And that was the end of my Citation Quasar starter kit. But it was the first model rocket product that I ever had, so I wanted to include it in my little history here. And that was pretty much the end of that chapter until about 5th grade. So we'll go to the next chapter here. Okay, so from 1973 we're going to fast forward a couple of more years to 1975. I'm 10 or 11 years old at this point. I'm in the 5th grade. And our class was given a writing assignment to write a story, and I wrote a story about space flight, you know, whether it was, I don't remember, it was kind of science fiction-y or whatever, but anyway, it had to do with space and flying in a rocket somewhere. And the recess period after that, I was approached by another classmate named Jeff Brewer. And he was somebody who had also written his story about space, and so he asked me if I wanted to, you know, be his friend and study about space because he was really interested in it, and then I was interested in it. So we're like, yeah, that sounds like fun. So out of that encounter, a friendship was born, and Jeff and I are actually friends to this day. Some 45 years later. Anyway, one of the first times I went over to Jeff's house, he showed me his older brother's box of Estes rockets. And again, we were interested in space, and so, you know, kind of followed that we'd want to see his brother's rocket collection. And so in that collection, I remember seeing for the first time a Mars lander. I want to say I saw a scrambler. There was a Honest John kit, the little School Level 4 one that wasn't as big as, not the Maxi Group, but the little smaller one. And he had that on a little display stand in his bedroom that was really cool looking. He had done a really nice job on it. And I just remember being blown away at the time. I don't think the Quasar thing was in my memory, but I remember seeing these rockets thinking, man, these things really fly. You can launch them. You can have like your own little space program. I was just like, wow, let's do that. Let's definitely do that. And so again, you know, being in 5th grade, my modeling skills were not very good. But anyway, Jeff was the first one to buy his own rocket after this, after we had decided we were going to do rockets. And he came to school probably a day or two later, and he had this kit with him. And again, this isn't the exact one. This is one I got off of eBay, but it was the same packaging, same exact kit, the Centauri Lil Hercules. And this is, you know, I looked at it and I'm like, wow, it's paper and wood, and it's like, how do you put it together? And, you know, that's cool. You know, I want one too. And so that night, I conned my mother into taking us to the local hobby store. And again, this is back when I lived in San Diego, and specifically we were in La Mesa. And the nearest hobby store was a little store called Mini City. If any of you are from that time and from that area, you probably remember Mini City. It was a pretty popular hobby store in San Diego area in the 70s. And I spent my entire allowance, and I probably conned my mom out of a couple more dollars, or well, it wouldn't be a couple more dollars, it'd be a little bit more. I didn't have a lot, but anyway, the first rocket I ever bought with my own money was the Centauri Micron. I still remember to this day being so proud that I had bought my own model rocket, and I took it to school and showed Jeff that, you know, hey, I got one too. It's the Centauri Micron. I wish I could say I built it and flew it, but I didn't. Again, paper, tube, wood glue, a streamer. I just didn't understand it. I built some plastic models at that time, but I I didn't paint them or do anything but just glue them together and play with them. So this was probably a little beyond my understanding of what modeling was, and so yeah, it never got built, unfortunately. But it did kind of plant the seed that rockets were cool, and I did want to kind of learn to do it someday. So that was sort of the second chapter, well, the third chapter. And it was not until the next chapter in my rocket history that I actually started building. So we'll go ahead and get to that now. Just real quick before we move on past the low Hercules and the Micron, I just wanted to show you that I did actually go back and clone those two rockets. These are two pretty exact clones of the low Hercules and the Centauri Micron. They were made from Samrock parts, and I did these about 10 years ago. But I just thought I'd kind of throw these in here just so you could see that I did actually go back and build the Micron, and then I even went and built the low Hercules just so I could have a little display of them. But yeah, so anyway, now we'll move on to the next part. Okay, so the next chapter is the chapter in which I actually started really getting involved in model rocketry. And after the 5th grade, actually after the 6th grade, my family moved from the San Diego area up to the Orange County area in a town called Cypress. I went to junior high school up there, and just to give you kind of a background, you know, I'm about 12 or 13 years old now. We're moving to a new area. I don't have any friends. Acne's starting to set in. I'm starting junior high school, which is traumatic enough. You know, we got to change classes, we got to dress out for PE, and oh my gosh, I got to shower with other people. I mean, there was a ton of things that were just going through my little teenage brain that were just about making my head explode. So I did try to make some friends on my street, and the vehicle that I used to do that was model rocketry. And the first friend I made was a guy by the name of John Lister. He lived a couple of houses down from me, and he was a pretty friendly guy. He was interested in, he lived with his mom, and I seem to remember him being really interested in science fiction stuff. So we automatically had some common ground there. But it didn't take long before we decided we were going to try to build a rocket. And another kid that lived just across the street from John, another couple houses down on the other side of the street, was a kid by the name of Steve Perkins. And we all kind of became friends. They were actually knew each other from before I got there, but when I got there, we all kind of decided we were going to do model rockets. And so we invested in and I don't remember who bought it, that's the thing. I remember building it at John's house, so it might have been John that bought it. But we bought and put together a starter set, an Alpha starter set, not the Alpha 3, but the original Alpha, Astron Alpha starter set from this would have been about 1976, 77, probably 77. And we actually built it this time. We actually, glued the fins on, painted it and everything, and then we decided we were going to go launch it, and we needed a place to launch it. Well, Steve's grandfather owned a cabin. I don't recall where. I might have been 29 Palms area, but I remember we had to drive a ways. It was out in the desert, and my parents had made arrangements with his grandfather to take us boys out with our rockets, and we were going to have our first rocket launch. So we had some time to prepare. This was kind of set out a way. So we decided that we didn't want just to fly the Alpha. We wanted to fly more stuff. So we kind of got our allowances together, and we bought a few more rockets. Well, let me show you the rockets that we took with us to our first rocket launch, because I have them all here, and let me get them set up. Okay, so here it is. This was our fleet, as it were, for our first rocket launch. And We had the Alpha from the kit, the starter set. We had broke the bank and went out and spent 99 cents and bought a little Mosquito. And we had a Constellation, which was a payloader. We were kind of excited about what we could put in that. And then my big purchase was an Astron Avenger, which you can see here. I've tried to faithfully clone the exact catalog version of the model, although the version that I painted back then was just probably white and black. I don't recall the exact color scheme, but it wasn't anything as elaborate as this. And then the star of our show was the Uss Atlantis, and that was just a really cool rocket. This just happens to be my favorite Estes rocket of all time, and probably in no small part because of the nostalgia behind it, the place it kind of holds in my personal history. But I just really like the looks of it. I think it really captures the Star Trek theme in a flyable design. Yeah, this was it. This was our fleet, and so out we go to the desert for our first ever rocket launch. Now, mind you, this is mid-1970s, so there's no internet, there's no YouTube, there's nothing. We didn't have videotape, so none of us had seen a rocket launch. None of us had ever seen a model rocket fly, never, on any kind of video form or even had it really described to us in detail. So we didn't know what to expect. Now, I know what I was expecting, and I was expecting, I saw rockets fly on TV, and they kind of rise up majestically on this pillar of flame and smoke, and it's really cool. And I don't think I was expecting anything quite that massive, but I was expecting something sort of like that. I thought, okay, well, this will be fun. This will be kind of like watching a miniature version of a real rocket launch. So anyway, we go into that. Well, we decided to start with the smallest rocket, which was the Mosquito. So we load this thing up on the launch pad, and all of our hard work and all of our anticipation, this had been months now that we've been building these rockets, we've been looking forward to this. We put this little Mosquito on the launch pad, we wire up the engine, we've looked at all the checklists and everything, and we press the button, and literally it was like watching a magic trick. That the rocket just disappeared in a little puff, and it was gone. We didn't see it go up, we didn't see it come down, we didn't know where it went, and we never saw that rocket again. It's out there in the desert to this day, probably. And yeah, it was just, to say we were underwhelmed or disappointed would be an understatement. We just thought, what was that? I mean, did it blow up? Did you see where it went? No, nobody knew anything. It was like, that was just really not what we were expecting. And had that been the only rocket we had, I wouldn't be filming this video because I never would have got into rocketry. That would have been the end of it. Fortunately, we did have some more rockets, and I think the next one we flew was the Alpha, which doesn't spend a lot of time on the launch pad when you hit the button, but we really saw it go up. We saw it pop its chute, and we saw it come down, and we thought, okay, that's more like it. That's cool. It's not exactly what we were expecting, but it's still pretty cool, and we had fun. And I don't remember necessarily all the other flights. I don't remember losing any rockets, but I do remember the Avenger was obviously one of the best ones. And then what I didn't mention was that my dad, my stepdad, because my mom had remarried, he built his own rocket out of a Christmas paper tube. He wanted to kind of get involved in this, and so he built his own homemade rocket out of a Christmas paper wrapper. And his was the biggest of all of them, and we actually flew that, and I had to obviously add some other parts. And so his rocket was actually probably one of the best ones because it was big and slow, and we could see it really well, and we just really enjoyed that. So it was all in all a very good time. It was something I still remember to this day. Just the elation and the joy and the fun and the camaraderie of building rockets with your best friends, and then getting to go out and fly them somewhat successfully. And as again, I've tried to clone all of those rockets, as you can see. I even made a little stand for the Atlantis here, which I'll throw up a picture, just because it is my favorite. Yeah, that was sort of the beginning. That was really the first time that I decided this is something I'm going to do, and this is something I'm going to stick with. And after this period, we moved from the Orange County area of California up to Kern County, into the mountains, into a little mountain town called Kernville. And I'll talk about that in the next part. Okay, so the next chapter, I guess you could say, would have been high school. Again, we went from Orange County. My family moved up to northern Kern County, to a place called Kernville, a very small town, about 1,000 people. It was around Lake Isabella. There's several little towns, and we all went to one high school with about 500 kids or less. Being in the mountains, there wasn't a lot of great areas to fly rockets that were close by, and my parents weren't really too into, we didn't have anybody that had a cabin or anything nearby, so the idea of just driving out into the middle of the desert, which would have been about a 3-hour drive each way, wasn't too appealing. We did do it once, I remember. Conned my folks into taking us out there one time. I don't remember a lot about that day. I do remember a couple of the rockets that I had at the time in high school were the Little John, fairly simple rocket. Again, this is a clone. No, actually, this is not a clone. No, this is a clone. So yeah, I had this kit. This is a mini engine rocket. And then the other one I remember really liking, just because of the decals, was of course the Citation Patriot. And this again is another clone. But yeah, I don't remember a lot about the day. I do remember it was it wasn't the greatest area to fly. There was a lot of uneven ground that you had to kind of trot over to try to get to your rocket as it was coming down. And again, it was just sort of I did a lot more building in high school. I did have several rockets built that I don't have clones of. I had a Gyrock, I had a Beta, I think I had a Sizzler, a Gamma, things that are on my list to clone, but just haven't got around to it yet. But a lot of those rockets never flew. I did have a Maxi Alpha that I did clone. I'll show that on another video, but yeah, that was kind of, high school was just sort of a continuation. I was still interested in rocketry, wasn't as active in flying, did a lot of building. But after high school, I met up with a group of friends in the next part of this video, where I really started to get involved in the hobby, and these are the friends that I still fly with to this day. So we'll get to that next. Okay, so real quick here, I did just want to kind of show you guys the Maxi Alpha, just because it is one of my favorite rockets. This is one that I did build in high school from the original kit. This one is sort of a beefed up version that I intended on flying, and so I put plywood centering rings, a stiffer body tube from Apogee Components, and I think it does still have the stock nose cone that I might have stolen off of a Executioner, and plywood fins, I think. Nope, they're balsa. They are balsa fins. Okay. So, but anyway, I did try to beef it up a little bit. But I just didn't want to show it because it was one of my favorite rockets. So there is that. That was when I first built in high school. So so after high school, and after some life drama that has nothing to do with rockets, I ended up back in San Diego, and I was just kind of starting my adult life down there, and getting a drafting degree and starting a career there. And I hadn't been down there very long before I was able to reconnect with my good friend Jeff Brewer, whom you remember from 5th grade. So Jeff and I hadn't seen each other in 10 years, so we had some catching up to do, but we both were still interested in the same things, and it didn't take long before we were discussing rockets and rocketry, and maybe getting started in that. And through Jeff, I met one of my other true best friends, a gentleman by the name of Ken Harkema. And Ken was actually my first roommate. He and I moved into an apartment in La Mesa just to save on expenses, and Jeff was still living with his parents at the time, going to school, and so this was kind of the nucleus of a group that would also later include a gentleman by the name of Dave Cook, who joined our little core group of friends. And then we, together, all four of us, formed the first San Diego, well, I don't know if it was the first, but at the time there wasn't one, the San Diego NAR section called DART. And DART was actually a section in Illinois that Dave Cook had belonged to as a young lad, and it was no longer active. The name wasn't being used. It had an old NAR section number, and we thought that was kind of cool if we could kind of steal that. And so Dave appropriated the DART name and section number, and we moved DART to San Diego, and we started the local DART club there. This was back in around 1988. I actually remember sending out, we printed up a newsletter, our first DART newsletter. Again, I was doing drafting at the time, and I remember we had kind of written out this newsletter, and I did this newsletter as a drawing, a CAD drawing, because we didn't have like fancy word processing programs back then. There was no Microsoft Word or anything, and I didn't own a computer at the time, but I had the ones access to at work. So anyway, I drew this newsletter up page by page as several CAD drawings, and printed it out, and then we taped pictures to the plot. We actually plotted this out on a plotter, the newsletter, and then we taped in the pictures, and then we Xeroxed it, and we made 20 or 30 copies, and we sent it out to all of the active NAR members in the San Diego area, and announced a meeting, and through that kind of mailer, we formed the San Diego Rocketry Club called DART, and that was a lot of fun, and I had a lot of fun with that group. I'm still in contact. They're still my best friends today. I fly with them whenever I can, whenever I'm out there. We always get together, and rocketry is always one of the things we're talking about. So through that group and through I'm going to go ahead and throw up a couple of pictures here. The first one, if I can recall this one, just to show you that I spend a lot of time on my rockets. I try to be pretty careful with them. I'm somebody that will be very meticulous and try to make sure everything's right and everything's perfect, and try to minimize any chances of problems. But this picture I'm going to throw up now is when things didn't go right. This is a picture of my Mercury Redstone that I had spent hours building, succumbing to a C53 Kato. And you can see that Jeff Brewer took this picture, and he caught the exact moment of disbelief as my rocket rapidly disassembles itself. But that was just a fun memory. It's I'm kind of glad I have this picture. I love this picture, even though I hated it at the time. But it's one of the pictures that I actually show people that it just brings back a lot of positive memories, even though it's of a bad occurrence. My first high power rocket was this would be considered mid power. We called it high power back then. But I went and bought an Estes Honest John, the Maxi Brute, and I converted it to a Flight Systems FSI F motor mount, and then we flew it on an F100. And here's a picture of that rocket as it sits on the old FSI launch pad in the desert outside of San Diego, waiting for its first flight. And then, so that would be considered mid-power today, but at the time, you know, there really wasn't a lot of high-power stuff that you knew about. I mean, there might have been things going on that in people's garages, but there wasn't the exposure that it had later on. And so the first high-power rocketry rocket that I built was actually a pretty large rocket called the King Viper 3 from Lock Precision. And this is back when Ron Schultz owned the company. And here's a picture of all of us standing near the King Viper 3 on its launch pad. Just a quick story about the launch pad. That's actually a launch pad. When I was doing drafting, I worked for a Caterpillar dealer in San Diego. And I actually had the guys in the shop weld together this launch pad. It's like a 12 or 13 inch steel tube with a 1/4 inch steel plate and square steel tubing for legs. It literally, you probably could have launched a rail rocket on this thing. It was it was way overbuilt. It was weighed a ton, but used a 1/2 inch launch rod for the King Viper 3. It was back when they just had the big launch lugs. They didn't do rails back then, or at least I didn't know about them. So, but anyway, here's a picture of it lighting off, and as you can see in the picture here, I only got 1 out of the 3 H90 motors to light, and so I was pretty amazed that it got as high as it did and ejected the parachute. It did, when it ejected the parachute, it did dink the nose cone a little bit, but other than that, it did survive. And I was happy about that, and I got my high power certification card signed by Lee Peaster, because if you know who Lee Peaster is, he was the owner and founder of Centauri Rocket Company, and they were actually up at Lucerne Dry Lake Bed for the Intertech unveiling. So not to get too down a rabbit hole here, but that was a rocket company that Lee was going to start up in the 80s that did mid-power, and it is now, those rockets are now part of the Aerotech line. So there's some rocket history for you. But anyway, Lee was there to showcase the Intertech line, and I got him to sign my first high-power certification card, so I thought that was pretty cool. So anyway, that's going to kind of wrap it up. This is still the group I fly with. I don't want to get into every single rocket I've ever built, but those are the kind of the big chapters in my rocket history. I'm planning a trip in a couple weeks here to go to San Diego, and I'm going to see Ken and Dave and Jeff, and we're going to build a Wildman kit with Ken in his garage that week. So it's just good to have friends in this hobby. I think that's really what is the main appeal of it. I mean, everybody likes the rockets and stuff, but it's the camaraderie and the friendship and just the experiences that you have together, positive experiences with your best friends that just really make this hobby something to enjoy, and I look forward to many, many more years of flying model rockets. So thank you for sticking with me through this, if you did. Again, the next video is going to be a project video. We're going to go ahead and clone or not clone, but kind of rework an Alpha 3, just as a quick one. And so look for that video. I'm going to be starting filming on that here in a couple days, so that video will hopefully follow this one pretty closely. So thank you again, and welcome to my channel, and we'll be seeing you.